Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm going to be redrawing and revisiting my crusty old webcomic slash manga I made when I was like 14-15 years old. I'm going to be talking about what I learned in that time, as well as the things that I think I was doing right back then. So hopefully this will be educational as well as just fun and embarrassing for me, because looking back at your old work, particularly your old writing, in my case at least, is always a little bit embarrassing. But I hope you guys find this useful and helpful if you are into making comics. So let's jump back to 2011 and see what we were working with here. I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint throughout this video, which is also the sponsor for this video. Clip Studio Paint is a drawing program, of course, that works really well with making manga and comics. I'll talk to you about it more at the end, as well as give you guys a special offer. So to start tackling this, I had to pick a page. I decided to pick page 4, or as I typed it back in the day, page 4. I don't know. I was very little random back in the day, I have to admit. And I was really fascinated with like heaven and hell and stuff like that. I mean, my family wasn't religious at all, but I thought it would be a really interesting story for basically a someone who's supposed to go to hell and someone who was supposed to go to heaven crashing into each other on the way and basically ending up in limbo, which is where they are in the page that I selected. So basically they're talking to a girl who basically decides whenever there's like an issue in the system where people go. Now the trick is with this page is basically she's like really lazy, so she decides to just send them both to hell because it's the easiest place to get into. So the main thing when I started sketching was I wanted to improve the like staging of everything. I didn't want to totally change the page, so I kept the general structure of the paneling and everything, but I wanted to make it a little bit better as far as like the way it flows, as well as like where the characters are looking. So one of the things that jumped out to me right away is this character is supposed to be floating in the air above Cole, who's the main character, the black-haired boy, but in the original page it looks like he's looking straight forward and she's kind of not looking anywhere. So I made sure that their eyes actually followed where they're locationally supposed to be. That was a simple fix. I also decided to do some more interesting stuff with the paneling. I thought it would be fun if, because she's sort of like floating and not being defined by like gravity or anything, it would be fun if she was breaking the panels. So in both the panels that she's in, I have like parts of her or her environment breaking out of the panel, so I just thought that would be kind of cool. Now, believe it or not, when I was originally making Coleslaw, which was the name of this webcomic if I haven't mentioned already, I actually used to draw the bubbles before I would write in the text, which is completely insane and would lead me to changing the dialogue to suit the bubble size that I had chosen. Honestly, that makes no sense at all. And also I was in a bit of a habit of having a lot of dialogue in one bubble, which I no longer do. This is something I really recommend if you're new to comics. One of the easiest ways to make your comic look a bit more professional is to just make sure that you're not filling up, you know, a paragraph of, you know, your comic all in one bubble. It looks really bad and clunky and makes it harder to read. So I trimmed down some of Cole's dialogue and made it a little bit just better and less cringy and bad, and just made it a little bit more direct, communicated things a little bit faster, and it also helps, you know, with this bubble issue that I was having before. Now, another thing I decided to do was I decided to make the panels more like wobbly. It's really easy in computer programs to make them like perfect, but I decided that it would be fun to do more of a very hand-drawn sort of look. I know I was going for that when I made the original comic page, but I didn't commit to it enough, so it just doesn't really read that way at all. So I went really ham on that this time, and I really tried to exaggerate the character's features. Cole's supposed to have really, really big eyes and just look very cute and innocent, especially because he's the like quote-unquote angel character. So I would definitely want to make him more dramatically different than the other characters around him. I mostly kept the Limbo girl's whole character design exactly the same. I don't even know where I'd begin to fix this, but I did take away her Ramona Flowers goggles because I just couldn't handle it. I also decided to cheat out some of the poses a little bit more. I actually think I did a pretty good job considering how young I was and how inexperienced I was of showing them falling, and I remember being really proud of it. But definitely some of the other poses were a little bit lazy. In particular, the third panel where the bunny girl is pressing a button to release a trapdoor to send them into hell. It's clear that I didn't really want to have to deal with her arms crossing over her body to press the button. So I just have her thumb just, fully dislocating from her hand so she can press it with one hand, which doesn't really look like a natural posture, let alone one that fit with her personality type. So in this one, I twisted her body so that her hands were away from the silhouette of her body so that the overall pose is more dynamic and easier to see. And I basically just made it very like flippant, cartoony, sort of like press the button, if that makes sense. Like, you really want it to be clear what's happening, so even at a small size you can really tell what's going on. That's super important in comics. And in general, I just really wanted her personality to be more present. In the original page, she just has this sort of like vague ominousness, as well as, clearly having some Gorillaz inspiration in the top panel, to the point where her nose looks completely different in the top one than it does to the bottom. And her proportions were also all over the place throughout this, because I never really did any character sheets, particularly for side characters that didn't last as long. I can tell I was struggling with her outfit because in a illustration I made that same year, I had her in a totally different outfit, even though the boys had the exact same outfits that they usually did. So clearly I was trying to like redesign her as I was making comic pages. Also, she was wearing leg warmers on top of thigh highs, which I don't think is a legitimate look. Another thing I tried to improve upon was having a little bit more personality in the word bubbles. Now, if you look at the original, the word bubbles are all exactly the same. They're a little wobbly, they're a little less like perfectly curved, but they don't really have any like indication of how the character is talking. So in the top one, because I remember she's supposed to say it impactfully, I did do a bit of a like more jagged word bubble just to make it differentiated from the regular conversation kind of stuff. And also when I do the screen tone on this one, I'm going to not use anything quite as crazy as I did in the first panel, because while it is visually interesting, I think it totally drowns out the character. And it just, honestly, I think I just stole that pattern off of Google Images, and when it's something that's that unique, that could actually end up biting you later on. So this time I'm going to try to tone down the screen tone and just use it to accent the art rather than being something that's so overpowering. I actually really like how I use the text as they fell in the original, but I think I'm going to change it to screaming instead. Like, I get the joke, like damn as in like they're being sent to hell, but like I just feel like the screaming trailing down as they fall is more dynamic and more interesting, especially if we sort of curve it around the characters rather than just being a block of text that's to the side of them. I also tried to convey that they were on a floating island. I remember picturing that when I was designing the scene, so I feel like this like strange floating disc that they're on, I'm going to try to give some impression of that rather than just a trapdoor in nothingness like it was in the original. Honestly, this challenge kind of stressed me out because I couldn't improve on a lot of the things that I was hoping to. Like the background was sort of set, and I designed it because I didn't like drawing backgrounds at the time, but now it kind of makes it impossible to have a good background unless I wanted to change the setting entirely, because it was a featureless plane with little clouds floating around it. Like, that's all I had to work with. So I kind of wish I could have redesigned the entire thing and all the characters, but then it might have looked totally different. I hope you guys enjoyed this extremely nostalgic challenge and that you try it out yourself if you're someone who's been making comics for a long time. And if you're someone who wants to start making comics but you don't know what program to choose, might I recommend Clip Studio Paint. Clip Studio Paint is a fantastic program if you're making anything comic related. It's also just good for like drawing and painting in general, as well as even animation, so it's very versatile. But I have honestly never used a program that feels so well suited for comics. There's so many things built in that just make it really easy. For example, when you draw text bubbles with the text bubble tool over text that you've already written down, which is how I usually do it, it automatically fuses those two things together into one layer, which really helps with layer bloat, which is something that drives me crazy. I'm also personally obsessed with the fact that you can actually say for the selection tools to ignore gaps of a certain size, because I'm sure all of you have struggled with the fact that sometimes when you use the fill bucket, there's a tiny microscopic gap in your line art, and other programs will just be like, I guess you don't want to fill this area, but in Clip Studio Paint, you can actually just tell it to ignore really tiny gaps. Screen toning in this program is actually a joy. It's so easy and so natural. I will never go back to screen toning on any other program. They are offering 500 licenses for a 3-month free trial of Clip Studio Paint Pro. I highly recommend you guys go into the description and try that out, because that is a really nice long trial and you could really get a feel for the program. So please take advantage of that if you're interested at all. And thank you so much to Clip Studio Paint for sponsoring this video. Thank you to all of my patrons, including Bald-Headed Potato, Bella Story, Best Kaiju, Braggy, Calpompon, Lion, Don't Eat Soap, Dr. Casket, Ilaria Louie, Eric G, Greer the Animator, Griffix, Hachiubi, Ice Cream Pal, Ivan Rodriguez, JJJ, Joseph Copel, Leblevleblem, Marina Costa, Mr. Dr. Pence, Nicole Ludwig, Nicola Queen, Nora Cornelison, Ruined Wayne Crow, Some Mediocre Artists, the RC Moose, Throat Foam, XAM, and your boy ST.